Thanks very much for the invite, Todd. I am very appreciative that you enjoyed Sugar and Spice and that it stuck with you. That's what writers try to do. Try to be memorable and try to tell a story that sticks with readers long after they're done. I'm going to read you an excerpt now. This is a story about a little girl who takes drastic measures in order to try to save her parents' marriage and make them happy again because they've had a devastating event that's happened to them. Why do you have to go on dates? People go on dates before they get married, not after, Samantha said to her mother as she watched her put on lipstick. Because it's good for Daddy and me. It helps keep our relationship healthy, her mother replied, sounding as if she was reading aloud from a book, one in which she wasn't particularly interested. Samantha could tell she was making an effort, which was how her mother referred to it when she did things she didn't really want to do, such as going to visit Daddy's mother, Grandma Lisa, or agreeing to run the Wednesday night Bible study group at church. They no longer went to church. Samantha's daddy had tried to convince her mommy to go, saying it might make her feel better, but she shouted that it would not make her feel better and had underlined that point by smashing her coffee cup down on the kitchen counter, shattering it and frightening Samantha so that she burst into tears. It's all right, honey. Mommy's just upset, her father told her and gave her a hug. Samantha leaned into him and inhaled his daddy's smell of spicy cologne and warm skin and wished that her mommy would stop shouting. She hated it when her mommy was angry like this. It was as if she had turned into another person, one who might bite or scratch. They'd all ask me, "How are you doing?" Her mommy's voice had taken on a sweet sing-song tone. Well, how the living blue fuck do those sanctimonious church bitches think I'm doing? How would they be doing if it happened to them? Samantha's daddy didn't answer. He told Samantha to go put on her jacket, and they'd go in the backyard and kick the soccer ball around. There was a soccer net back there with a frame of white PVC pipes that Arden, Samantha's sister, used for practice when she was on the soccer team at day camp last summer. The backyard's ankle-deep in leaves. Do you want me to go to the park and play soccer there? I can drive you, Samantha's mommy said. Her voice sounded mean. I hate this, Samantha thought desperately. It can't be like this forever, can it? Her father seemed to shrivel up the way he always did when his wife talked about driving him somewhere. No, I'd better rake the leaves, he said, and went out the sliding glass door. Samantha followed him, and together they raked leaves, her daddy using the big rake and Samantha using her little one, until it got too dark to see. When they went back inside, her mommy had gone to bed, although it wasn't even Samantha's bedtime yet, and she hadn't made them anything for dinner. That's when Samantha realized she had to do something to make her parents happy again.
Hi, I'm Sunil Patel. Thank you, Todd, for having me. The story is a partial list of lists I have lost over time, and it is a very short story, and it's very confusing in a way. So any excerpt I read will be very special. I'll just read the first little bit. Will give you a taste of what kind of story it is. So, a partial list of lists I've lost over time. To-do list for July 18th, 2039. 1. Kill my duplicate from another dimension. 2. Get rid of all this stupid kale. Top 5 reasons I hate kale. 1. Kale is like broccoli that wishes it were lettuce, or lettuce that wishes it were broccoli. Get your own identity, kale. 2. It contains too much vitamin A, just way too much. 3. It tastes like sadness with an option for despair. 4. Every time I've been forced to eat kale, I get a parking ticket the very next day. Coincidence? 5. I can only think of 4 reasons I hate kale.
My name is Rihanna Milcar Scott. The title of the story is Infestation. Dearest slumlord, the ceiling in the kitchen cracked and split, and from the black abyss, in between the clouds of plaster, dived a team of brown water bugs the size of baby mice. Each thwip, thwip, thwip of their wings raised in me a light shudder. I stood mesmerized, watching the paratroopers cascade. After a minute, I scrambled for the nearly empty can of bug spray stashed in the cabinet beneath the sink, and I sprayed, catching 2 or 3 as they descended. Their bug wings stopped in mid-flight, and the pestilence tumbled to the floor, where they seized and convulsed and spun on their backs, before lying still, save for a few stray twitches. The water bugs already on the floor, scattered while I tried to reach them with the can's sputtering stream. In the broken ceiling, their comrades surveyed the damage of the scene. The bugs aimed backward, thinking better of their planned descent. And then they made their retreat deep into the abyss, where it remained safe.
My name's Terry Bisson, and the short story is called I'm a Science Fiction Writer, an American. I live in California. And I've been a science fiction writer for several years, about 30 or 40 actually. And They're Made Out of Meat was one of my shorter stories, and it got a certain amount of its appeal to people because it's sort of funny, and so it's been I would say a successful story for me. And maybe I'll read how the introduction, sort of how it's only about 1,000 words long. It was originally published in Omni magazine back in 1990, and here's the way it goes. Let me find the beginning. And it's an all-dialogue short story. It's just 2 characters speaking. They're made out of meat. Meat? Meat. They're made out of meat. Meat? There's no doubt about it. We picked up several from different parts of the planet, took them aboard our recon vessel, and probed them all the way through. They're completely meat. That's impossible. What about the radio signals, the messages, and the stars? They use the radio waves to talk, but the signals don't come from them. The signals come from machines. So who made the machines? That's who we want to contact. They made the machines. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Meat made the machines. That's ridiculous. How can meat make a machine? You're asking me to believe in sentient meat?
B.A. Varghese, Storage. Caesar looked to the white wall on the opposite side of the window. Though the wall looked similar to the other walls in the cube, there were small cracks here and there, visible handprints, as well as a portion of the wall near the top left that appeared blurred, as if the wall itself was smudged into the corner. Display album, Grandma. The wall blinked black and hummed and brightened with a slow illumination. Then a flicker and a flutter of images appeared.
My name's Chris Ashton, and this is Howling Mad. The miles had left him footsore, and hunger was Billy's constant companion, but the worst carnage was now 8 days behind him, and the barrel of the rifle slung over his shoulder had been cold for 2. They had stayed put on his father's insistence while Bathurst was overrun. We have a home ground advantage, we're safer here. But when marauders besieged their house and gave Billy his first inkling the living might be more dangerous than the dead, he had plucked up his rifle and begun a one-man exodus, first from his home and then from his hometown. Amid a dust storm of shock and grief, his only plan had been to head westward and seek out emptiness. In this altered world, a world where a freak such as he was deemed comparatively normal, emptiness was next to godliness. The town, silhouetted in the morning sun, seemed to rise from the bitumen as he ascended the crumbling road's gentle slope. Kangaroo Flats was a fly speck, a final civilised scrap on the fringe of the outback's desolate desert heart. Upon the porch of a weatherboard cottage sat an old man in an antique timber rocking chair. Billy unslung his rifle. He pointed the muzzle at the ground to show he meant no malice, but intended to take no chances. "Morning," the old man said, lifting his hand in a lazy greeting. "Morning," Billy said back. He stopped at the bottom of the porch stairs and then glanced over his shoulder to observe the bodies littering the road and the grass verge. "You won't need that thing," the old man said, motioning at Billy's rifle. "Haven't seen a creeper around here in ages. Crows got 'em all." "Crows? They love their eyes. Smart birds, crows. They soon figured out the creepers weren't a danger to them. They'd just fly in and peck out their eyes. It seemed to peck the heart out of them as well. They'd just lie down and give up. Maybe because they couldn't see."
Hello, I'm James H. Longmore. The title of my short story is Carnal Harvest, and it was featured in Schlock Horror, which is an anthology by Hellbound Books from, I think, was it last year, 2 years ago? I think it was 2 years ago now. Wow. And I shall read a minute or so just to whet the appetite, as it were. Okay, here we go. Tommy Rydell was still very much alive when his eyeballs were plucked from their sockets. "Please," his voice, high and shrill, was soaked up by the verdant foliage of the dense woods that surrounded him, closing in on his terrified form like some dark, smothering, malevolent creature. The person sitting astride Tommy on the damp, mossy ground was heavy enough to render him entirely helpless, no matter how much the terrified boy wriggled and fought. His hands, trapped beneath his attacker's sharp, bony knees, felt numb beneath the weight, his trapped wrists feeling as if they could snap at any moment. "I'll do anything you want," Tommy pleaded. "Just please don't kill me." He stared at the face that hovered above him, into the cold, staring eyes that burned out from behind the dark grey ski mask. There was a glaring halo of sunlight around the featureless head, created by a persistent shaft of light that sneaked through the canopy high above, and in Tommy's frantic mind, he thought his assailant resembled some kind of evil angel. If his attacker wanted to do sexual stuff, that was quite all right with him. Hell, he was 13 and all bets were off as to where Tommy Rydell got his kicks. There was just no need for all the brutality and overriding promise of an untimely death. Tommy had been out stalking around the woods, a popular destination for the older kids who craved a little alone time, as he did most weekends. There was just something special about sunny Sunday afternoons that just screamed make-out time. Tommy would sneak around the concealing shade of the trees and overgrown shrubs, find himself a frisky couple of high schoolers, make himself comfortable and settle down to enjoy the show. Sometimes, if he was really lucky, a courting couple would get really carried away on the soft, leafy ground, get completely naked and go through all of the bases like they were going out of fashion. It was one heck of a way for Tommy to get his sex at.
Okay, this story is Deserted Lies the City, and I'm Sunny Dean, and I was just going to read the very first introduction because I think that makes the most sense and is in context. Whenever Ellen asked how we run out of food, Isa would say yes, and they'd play a game of imagination sandwiches where their hands became bread and they imagined what went between the slices. When he asked how far do we have to walk, she would tell him in miles, yards, and finely feet so he could count their steps across the wastelands. She never hid the truth from her son. That night, as they watched New Nazareth burn from their little bridge over the mountains, Ellen asked, "Did I do that?" Isa nodded behind her veil. "Yes, you did." His hand, small and dusty, found hers. "Will everybody die?" Probably. Those who weren't killed by the fire will die from exposure. What's exposure? Just radiation and heat, she said to him. Nothing we have to worry about. I'm tired, he told her with the selfish honesty of a 6-year-old. Isa dug out their blanket and wrapped him in it. Sleep, then. Though he'd grown too big for her to carry him swaddled on her back, the blanket was still a thing of comfort.
Gus Moreno. I'm a fiction writer, and the story I'm about to read is called The Great Filter. So I've got an excerpt prepared. The unit below mine apparently ordered fried chicken for dinner. The aroma wandered into my apartment through the vents, the salty smell staggering from the kitchen to the living room. Marin was still at the hospital, working the tail end of a double shift because they lost another nurse. She left a note on the fridge. "Feed me, Seymour." I checked the cupboards, the cabinets under the sink, and the only edible thing I found required a can opener gone missing and a working microwave we didn't own. The smell of chicken was so powerful I walked into the living room and smoked a cigarette. Marin's camera, the one she used to take everywhere with her, sat on the end table. I flipped on the television. The 12,000-year-old man was playing. It's a comedy skit, and the most popular thing on TV since I can remember. Two actors wearing tuxedos sit on stools on an unlit stage, the spotlight on them. The taller, more handsome man, coined the straight man, interviews the other gentleman in a tux, who plays the titular 12,000-year-old man. "We hear your world was quite a violent time." "Boy," the 12,000-year-old man snapped his head back. "They would come into your school and shoot your whole class with a machine gun," he said. "That's awful." "I know. They said we would be reading books in class. All I ever saw were magazines." Laughter thundered off screen from an audience presumably behind the camera, seated in the dark rafters. Their laughs sounded like bowling lanes. "That's awful," the straight man said. "But if there's any consolation, at least you didn't live in one of the developing countries that had succumbed to climate change." "But those countries had the best drinking games," the 12,000-year-old man said. "Really? Like what?" "Last one to find drinkable water dies." Keys jingled in the hallway. Marin swung the door open, her left arm weighed down by a single grocery bag. "Who's hungry?" she said. Marin chopped vegetables, and we ate stir-fry and minute rice, and spent the rest of the night on the couch, listening to police sirens bounce off the walls. I was slapping at my shirt after ash fell off my cigarette. "Why are you smoking with your left hand?" she said. "Just wanted to change of pace." Ever the spontaneous man. At the hospital, Marin assisted in another robotic prosthesis. The patient had lost his hand in a fishing boat's motor blade after it stalled out on the water. The prosthesis was one of those pump-action ones that came with attachments. It just so happened to work on an assembly line. His employer and insurance provider split the costs. "It was the other way around in my day," the 12,000-year-old man said. "Back in my time, you went to college for 4 years, not to prison." "What was that like?" the straight man said. He shrugged his shoulders. "The beds were worse?" "They have a name for what happened to Patrick. It's called lopping, and it was happening everywhere."